Leverage buyout. When we talk about leverage buyout, actually leverage buyout is a kind of acquisition in which the company, company or any other other party, or even the management can acquire a company, and but for acquiring that company they use a significant amount of borrowed money in order to meet the cost of acquisition, and in result the assets of the acquired company and acquiring company are being used as a collateral for that loan. As when we as Why they use debt? Because when we use debt in our business, it actually decrease our cost of corporate taxes and income taxes, whereas when we use more amount of equity, it increase our dividend liabilities and payment. This They also help us to reduce the cost of financing, and our gains would be will also increase as a result. And the debt obviously serve as a lever in order to increase our returns. The term LBO is actually usually when employed when a financial sponsor acquire a company. However, many corporate transactions are potentially funded by bank debts. Thus, effectively, there are many other type of LBOs, such as management buyout, in management buy-in, secondary buyout, and territory buyout, among and many other other type of situations. And these kind of buyouts can occur in a situation of growth, or when company want to restructure, or at the time when the companies are in insolvencies. And also the LBOs can occur in most of the time in private companies, but they can also occur in public limited companies. As But there are situations when financial sponsor increase their return by employing more amount of debt as compared to equity, and they want to have an incentive to employ as much debt as possible to finance an acquisition. And at certain times it leads to a situation where the company is over leveraged, and the company is not able to generate much funds to actually service their debts, and in turn they lead to their solvency, or to debt equity swaps, in which the equity owner lose control over the business to the lenders. Characteristics of leverage buyout. While a different firm pursue a different type of strategy, and there are certain characteristics that are true across many different types of leverage buyout. First of all, stable cash flow. The company being acquired in a leverage buyout must have sufficient and stable cash flows to pay its interest expense and repay principal over time. So mature companies with long-term customer contracts and or relatively predictable cash structures are commonly acquired in LBOs. Secondly, relatively low fixed cost. Fixed costs create a substantial amount of risk for private equity firms, because companies still have to pay them even if their revenue decline. Thirdly, uh, relatively little existing debt. The math in an LBO works because the private equity firm adds more debt to a company's capital structure, and then the company repays it over time, resulting in a lower effective purchase price. It's tougher to make a deal work when a company already has a high debt balance. Then valuation. Private equity firms prefer companies that are moderately undervalued or appropriately valued. They prefer not to acquire companies trading at extremely high valuation multiples relative to the sector, because of the risk that valuation could decline. Lastly, strong management team. Ideally, the C-level executive will have worked together for a long time, and will also have some vested interest in the LBO by rolling of their shares when the deal takes place. So these are the major characteristics of leverage buyouts. There are different types of leverage buyout. First, we will talk about management buyout. It's a special case of leveraged acquisition, and the actually the management, the incumbent management has no or close to no share in the company, acquires a sizable portion of the shares of the company, similar to an MBO is an MBI, that is management buy-in, in which an external management team acquires the shares. An MBO can occur for a number of reasons. For example, ownership wishes to retire and chose to sell the company to trusted members of the management, or ownership has lost faith in the future of the company business, and actually they are willing to sell their company, and which believes that in the future the business, in order to retain some value for investor in the business, management sees a value in the business that ownership does not see and does not wish to pursue. In most situations, the management team does not have enough money to fund the equity needed for the acquisition, so that management teams work together with the financial sponsors to part finance the acquisition. For the management team, the negotiation of the deal with the financial sponsor is a key value creation lever. Financial sponsor can often sympathetic to MBO, as in these cases they are assured that management believe in the future of the company and has an interest in value creation. Actually, there are no clear guidelines as to how a big share the management team must owe after the acquisition in order to qualify as an MBO, as opposed to a normal situation, a normal leverage buyout in which the management invests together with the financial sponsor. However, in the usual use of the term, an MBO is a situation in which the management team initiates and actively pushes the acquisition. MBO situation lead management team often into a dilemma as they face a conflict of interest, that is being interested in a low purchase price personally, while at the same time being employed by the owner who obviously have an interest in a high purchase price. Owners usually react to the situation by offering a deal fee to the management team if a certain price threshold is reached. Financial sponsor usually react to this again by offering to compensate the management team for a lost deal fee if the purchase price is low. Another mechanism to handle these problems are earnouts, that is purchase price being contingent on reaching certain future profitabilities. There are probably just so many successful MBOs as there are unsuccessful MBOs, but crucial for the management team at the beginning, the process is negotiation of the purchase price and the deal structure and selection of the financial sponsor. So if you have to if an MBO has to be successful, it's very important that you should be very careful about these three crucial important things. Another type or category of leverage buyout is secondary and territory buyouts. When it comes to the secondary buyout, it's actually a form of leverage buyout where both the buyer and the seller are private equity firms or financial sponsors. A leverage buyout of a company that was acquired through a leverage buyout is actually a financial sponsor. And a secondary buyout will often provide a clean break for the selling private equity firms and its limited partner investor. Historically, given that secondary buyouts were perceived as distressed sales by both seller and buyer, limited partner investor considered them unattractive and largely avoided them. The increase in secondary buyout in actually in the period of 2000s was driven in large part by an increase in capital available for the leverage buyout, often selling the private equity firm pursue a secondary buyout for a number of reasons, including sales to strategic buyers and initial public offering may not be possible for niche or undersized companies. Secondary buyouts may generate liquidity more quickly than other routes, like for example IPOs. Some kind of business, for example, when with relatively slow growth but which generate high cash flows, may be more appealing to private equity firms than they are to public stock investor or other corporations. Often, secondary buyout have been successful if the investor has reached an age where it is necessary or desirable to sell rather than hold the investment further, or where the investor has already generated sufficient value for the selling firms. Secondary buyout differ from secondaries or secondary market purchases, which typically involve the acquisition of portfolios of private equity assets, included limited partnership stakes and direct investment in corporate securities. And if a companies that are acquired in a secondary buyout get sold to another financial sponsor, the resulting transaction is called territory buyouts. If we are valuing buyout, if we have to see that in the many cases leverage buyouts are mostly financed proportionally with the debts, and in most cases high leverage is justified in several cases. Firstly, if the target firm initially has too little debt relative to its optimal debt ratio, the increase in debt can be explained partially by increasing in value, moving to optimal ratio provided. So the debt level in most leverage buyout exceeds the optimal debt ratio, however, which means that some of the debt will have to be paid off quickly in order for the firm to reduce its cost of capital and its default risk. Because if you use too much debt and disproportionately increase debt, so it will create more risk, and later on it will create a problem of default, goes to the problem of default. A second explanation is provided by Michael Jensen, who proposed that manager cannot be trusted to invest free cash flows wisely for their stakeholders. They need to discipline the debt payment to maximize cash flows on projects and values. A third rationale is that the high debt ratio is temporary and will disappear once the firm liquidates assets and pays off a significant portion of debt. The extreme high leverage associated with leverage buyout creates two problems in valuation. Firstly, it significantly increased the riskiness of cash flows to equity investor in the firm by increasing the fixed payment to debt holders in the firm. Thus, the cost of equity has to be adjusted to reflect the higher financial risk the firm will face after the leverage buyout. Secondly, the expected decrease in this debt over time as the firm liquidates assets and pays off debt implies that the cost of equity will also decrease over time, since the cost of debt and debt ratio will change over time as well. The cost of capital will also change in each period. And when we are valuing the leverage buyout, when we begins to estimate free cash flows to the firm, however, instead of discounting these cash flow back at a fixed cost of capital, we discount them back at a cost of capital that will vary from year to year. And once we value the firm, we can then compare the value of the total amount paid for the firm. Now we can take an example of Congolium company, and we'll value its leverage buyout. If we look at the manager of Congolium Incorporation targets the firm for leverage buyout in 1979, then planned to buy back the share at $38 per share. It was traded at $24 prior to the takeover, and to finance the acquisition primarily with debt. If we looked at the cost of takeover is buyback stock is equal to $38 per share and multiplied by 12.2 million shares, that will give 463.60 million. Expenses of takeover are 7 million and total cost is 470.60 million. Financing mix for a takeover is that they use 117.30 million as equity, 327.10 million as debt, and 26.26 million as preferred stock, which will sum up to a total proceeds of 470 million, 70.60 million. If we look at the sources of debt used in this deal is that basically there are three types of or sources of debt will be used. Firstly, bank debt of 125 million at 14% interest rate to be repaid in annual installment of 16.666 million, and it will start in 1980. Secondly, senior notes of 115 million at 11.25 interest rate to be repaid in equal installment of 7.636 million each year from 1981, and subordinated bond of $92 million at 12.25% interest to be repaid in equal installment of 7.636 million each year from 1989. The firm also assumed 12.2 million of existing debt at the advantageous rate of 7.50%. This debt would be repaid in 1982, and the debt value exceeds the transaction amount reflecting transaction cost. Based upon the data for the current period, EBIT is 89.80, capital spending is 6.80, depreciation is 7.5, and working capital is 4.0. In 1980, EBIT is 71.69 and so on. In 1984, it is 137.23. Capital spending is also $15.0 million dollars at 1980, and in 1984 it is 20.4, and in depreciation in current period it is 7.5 million dollars, and in total 1984 it is $21.93. And a change in working capital is $4 million at currently, and in 1984 it would reach up to $12.8 million. Based upon this data, we will estimate our free cash flows. Now, using the same approach as we have used in the previous questions, first we will conclude the EBTI after taxes, and then we will add depreciation, deduct capital expenditure and change in working capital, and we will calculate free cash flows. And based upon this data, we will estimate the free cash flows for each period, and after that we will calculate the discounted free cash flows by using the varying cost of capital for each period. Now, if you look at the cost of the capital, from 1980 to 1986, your debt has gradually decreased, your equity is gradually increased, and the preferred stock remained same over the years. Same is the case with the debt to capital ratio. For debt to capital ratio, it has gradually decreased over the year, as in 1980 it was 52.03, and with certain variation in 1986 it becomes 25.91% in 1986. And equity to capital ratio has gradually increased from 43.80 to 70.88 in 1986. As in case of preferred stock to capital, it is also gradually decreased from 4.17% to 3. In 1980 to 3.21% in 1986. The beta has also gradually decreased, like for example in 1980 it was 2.02547, and in 1986 it become 1.4745. Your cost of equity has gradually decreased from 20.64% to to 17.61% in 1986. The after tax cost of debt was stable from 1980 to 1984, which was 6.53%, but in 1986 it gradually decreased to 5%. Cost of preferred stock remained the same over the year as 13.5%, 51% from 1981 to 1986. Your cost of capital has gradually increased, like for example in 13% in 1980, 13.29% in 1981, 13.66% in 1982, and 14% in 1983, 14.31% in 1984, and 14.21% in 1986. In order to calculate terminal value, the same procedure would be used. Like the free cash flows in 1985 would be divided by cost of capital in 1985 minus the growth rate at that time. So over here, like terminal value of the firm at the end of 1984 is $72.09 divided by 0.1421 minus 0.08. So $1,161 million is the terminal value of these cash flows. In order to calculate the value of leverage buyout, the expected cash flow to the firm and the terminal value were discounted back to the present at the cost of capital to yield a present value of 820.21 million. Since the acquisition of Conglom cost only 470.6 million, this acquisition creates value for the acquiring investor.